Sarah Johnson's alarm chimed at precisely 5:30 a.m., though she had been awake for the past 10 minutes, mentally rehearsing the new training routine she planned to teach her young athletes. The early morning sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, catching the edge of her Olympic gold medal displayed on the dresser. She allowed herself a small smile, remembering the moment it was placed around her neck 3 years ago. The medal served as a daily reminder of not just her achievement, but the responsibility that came with it. 30 young athletes would be waiting for her at the sports center this morning, each one carrying dreams as big as the ones she once held. Sarah had deliberately chosen to coach in this neighborhood, knowing that talent could bloom anywhere if given the right opportunity. She rushed through her morning routine with the same precision that had earned her that medal. Hair pulled back into a neat bun, training outfit crisp and professional, gym bag packed with equipment and training plans. A quick glance at her watch showed 6:45 a.m. The sports center was 20 minutes away, and her first session started at 7:15. Sarah grabbed a protein bar from the kitchen counter, already calculating the route in her head. Morning traffic would be building, but she knew all the shortcuts. Her phone buzzed as she locked her front door. A text from Marcus, one of her most promising young gymnasts. "Coach Sarah, I mastered the routine," accompanied by a video clip. She couldn't help but grin. Marcus had been working on that sequence for weeks. Behind the wheel of her modest sit-in, Sarah navigated the early morning streets while her mind raced through lesson plans. The protein bar lay forgotten in the passenger seat. At each red light, she quickly glanced at her phone, watching snippets of Marcus's video. The determination in his movements reminded her of herself at his age, practicing in her mother's garage, because they couldn't afford proper gym membership. The traffic moved steadily until she reached downtown. Construction had narrowed the usual 4 lanes to 2, creating an unexpected bottleneck. Sarah drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, watching precious minutes tick by. 7:05 a.m. She thought of the kids already gathering at the center, their parents having dropped them off early on their way to work. When traffic finally broke free, Sarah accelerated perhaps a bit too eagerly. The intersection ahead showed yellow, and she made a split-second decision. She could make it. The light turned red just as she entered the intersection. Her heart sank as she caught the flash of blue lights in her rearview mirror. Sarah pulled over immediately, her hand steady on the wheel as she'd been taught. Through her side mirror, she watched the officer approach, his reflective vest bright in the morning sun. Her mind raced through the implications, not just the time lost for her waiting students, but the example this would set. She had always taught her athletes about responsibility and consequences. The tap on her window brought her back to the present moment. As she lowered it, Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself that champions face challenges with grace, whether on the mat or off. The morning sun caught her Olympic ring as she reached for her license and registration, a subtle reminder of who she was and what she stood for. "License and registration, please," the officer requested, his tone professional but firm. Sarah nodded, already knowing this morning was about to become much more complicated than she had planned. The courthouse's marble floors echoed with Sarah's footsteps as she hurried through security. Her training outfit, black leggings, and a fitted Navy team jacket, stood out among the suits and formal attire of other attendees. She had come straight from morning practice, her hair still damp from a quick shower, carrying the same determination she brought to every competition. Courtroom 3 buzzed with quiet conversation. Sarah found a seat in the back row, observing the proceedings while she waited for her case to be called. Her students' parents had been understanding about the shortened morning session, but she couldn't help checking her phone repeatedly, making sure no emergencies had arisen at the sports center. Judge William Reynolds commanded attention without effort. His silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him an air of distinction, while his straight-backed posture spoke of someone accustomed to authority. Sarah watched him handle each case with swift efficiency, his decisions delivered in a measured tone that left no room for argument. Case number 247. Sarah Johnson, the clerk announced. Sarah rose, smoothing her jacket as she approached the podium. The wooden barrier felt cool under her hands as she gripped it, muscle memory from years of gymnastics, automatically adjusting her posture to perfect form. Judge Reynolds peered over his glasses, his gaze taking in her athletic attire with a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Ms. Johnson, you're charged with running a red light at the intersection of Oak and Mame on Tuesday morning. How do you plead?" "Your Honor, I acknowledge going through the light," Sarah began, her voice carrying the same steady confidence that had served her through countless interviews. "However, I'd like to explain the circumstances. I was running late for—" "Ms. Johnson," Judge Reynolds interrupted, "the light was either red or it wasn't. The officer's report clearly states you entered the intersection after the signal changed. Your reason for rushing doesn't change the fact that you endangered yourself and others." Sarah straightened her shoulders, feeling the familiar tension she used to channel before major competitions. "Sir, I understand the seriousness of traffic safety. As someone who works with young people, I teach responsibility every day. I was heading to the sports center where I coach. Your occupation is not relevant to these proceedings." Judge Reynolds cut in again, shuffling the papers before him. "The court's time is valuable, Ms. Johnson. You've admitted to the violation. Given the officer's report of your speed entering the intersection, I'm setting the fine at $400, the maximum for this offense." The amount made Sarah's breath catch. It represented a significant portion of her monthly coaching income, but her expression remained composed. Years of competition had taught her to maintain dignity under pressure. Additionally, Judge Reynolds continued, barely glancing up, "I'm requiring you to attend a traffic safety course. Perhaps that will help you understand the importance of following basic traffic laws, regardless of your schedule." Sarah's hand tightened on the podium, but her voice remained steady. "I understand, Your Honor." She had faced tougher moments than this, moments when judges' scores had determined years of work, when tenths of points had meant the difference between glory and disappointment. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the next person in line, dressed in a crisp business suit, receiving a noticeably warmer greeting from the judge. Sarah lifted her chin and walked out with the same grace she had once used to exit the Olympic floor, her spine straight and her steps measured. Champions, she reminded herself, showed their true character not in victory, but in how they handled setbacks. Madison Elementary's gymnasium hummed with excited chatter as parents and grandparents found their seats on the metal folding chairs. Judge William Reynolds adjusted his tie, feeling somewhat out of place among the casual Friday afternoon crowd. His granddaughter Emma had begged him to attend her class presentation on local heroes, and despite his heavy docket, he'd managed to leave the courthouse early. "Grandpa, you came." Emma's voice carried across the gym as she spotted him. She wore her favorite blue dress, her presentation notes clutched tightly in her hands. The sparkle in her eyes reminded him of her grandmother, making him glad he'd made the effort to attend. Principal Martinez stepped up to the microphone, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Welcome, everyone, to our 5th grade presentation on local heroes. Our students have spent the past month researching and interviewing remarkable individuals who make our city special." Reynolds settled back in his chair, prepared for the usual parade of firefighters and police officers. He'd sat through enough school presentations to know the routine. Emma was third in line, and he watched proudly as she approached the podium, her shoulders squared with determination. "My local hero," Emma began, her voice clear and confident, "changed how I think about what's possible." She pressed a button on the remote, and the projector screen lit up. Reynolds felt his chest tighten as a familiar face appeared, the young woman from his courtroom earlier that week. The image showed Sarah Johnson mid-flight during her Olympic routine, her body curved in a perfect arc against the backdrop of the American flag. "Sarah Johnson won gold in gymnastics," Emma continued, "but that's not why she's my hero. She's my hero because she chose to come back home and help kids like me believe in ourselves." Reynolds sat straighter, his judicial demeanor slipping as Emma clicked through more slides. Sarah coaching young gymnasts at the local sports center. Sarah speaking at career day. Sarah helping organize a fundraiser for new equipment at the community gym. Ms. Johnson started a scholarship program, Emma explained, her voice growing more animated. She uses her own money to help kids who can't afford training. She gets up super early every morning to coach before school, and she stays late to work with kids whose parents can't pick them up right away. The next slide showed Sarah surrounded by beaming children, her Olympic medal hanging around a young girl's neck. She lets us hold her medal and says that dreams don't care where you come from. She says champions are made by how they treat others, not just by what they win. Reynolds felt a growing discomfort as he remembered his dismissive treatment of Sarah in court. The woman he pegged as irresponsible was spending her mornings helping children chase their dreams. Last month, Emma continued, unaware of her grandfather's internal struggle. When Jenny's mom got sick, Ms. Johnson drove her to practice every day and helped her with homework after training. She says being part of a community means showing up for each other. The final slide showed Sarah teaching a young boy with leg braces how to balance on a low beam, her face lit with the same patience and dedication Reynolds had mistaken for casualness in his courtroom. Emma's voice swelled with pride as she delivered her conclusion. Sarah Johnson isn't just an Olympic champion. She's a champion for all of us who need someone to believe in us. As applause filled the gymnasium, Reynolds remained seated, his hands folded in his lap. The weight of his earlier judgment pressed heavily on his shoulders, while Emma's words echoed in his mind. Champions are made by how they treat others. Judge Reynolds sat in his home office, his usual evening routine forgotten. The leather chair that had always felt so comfortable now seemed to prod at his conscience. His laptop glowed in the dimming light, the search bar cursor blinking expectantly. Sarah Johnson, Olympic gold medalist. The first video that appeared was titled, "The Golden Moment of Sportsmanship." Reynolds clicked play, watching as a younger Sarah Johnson prepared for her final routine. The announcer's voice crackled with excitement. Johnson needs a near-perfect score to secure gold. But wait, what's happening? The camera panned to show another gymnast, a competitor from another country, clutching her ankle after a bad landing. Instead of focusing on her own preparation, Sarah immediately rushed to help, offering support and calling for medical assistance. The commentators praised her spirit, while noting how this interruption might affect her performance. "In all my years covering gymnastics," one announcer said, "I've never seen an athlete risk their golden moment like this." Reynolds leaned closer to the screen, watching Sarah help the injured gymnast to the medical team, then returned to the mat without a moment to recenter herself. What followed was nothing short of magnificent. Sarah's routine captured a perfect blend of power and grace, each movement flowing into the next with precision that even Reynolds' untrained eye could appreciate. When she stuck the landing, the arena erupted. The score flashed. 9.95. Gold. Reynolds opened another tab, finding articles about Sarah's journey. Born and raised in their city, she'd trained in a converted warehouse because proper facilities were too expensive. Her single mother worked 3 jobs to support her training. Sarah had earned scholarships through both athletic excellence and academic achievement, graduating with honors while training for the Olympics. His cursor hovered over a recent local news article. Olympic champion chooses community over celebrity. The piece detailed how Sarah had declined lucrative opportunities in larger cities to return home and open her training program. She charged minimal fees and offered scholarships, working part-time as a physical therapist to support her coaching passion. A photo showed Sarah spotting a young gymnast with leg braces, the same scene from Emma's presentation. The caption revealed that Sarah had developed a specialized program for children with physical challenges, integrating therapeutic exercises with gymnastics basics. Reynolds rubbed his temples, remembering his curt dismissal of her explanation in court. The traffic violation remained a fact, but his handling of it now seemed unnecessarily harsh. His granddaughter's words echoed. Champions are made by how they treat others. He clicked another video, this one from a local news segment filmed at Sarah's gym. The camera panned across a diverse group of young athletes, their faces bright with determination. Sarah moved among them, adjusting positions with gentle hands, offering encouragement with a warm smile. Many of these kids couldn't afford traditional gymnastics training, Sarah explained in the interview. But talent doesn't check bank accounts first. Sometimes all a champion needs is a chance and someone who believes in them. The word struck Reynolds particularly hard. How many times had he sat in judgment, making assumptions based on appearances or circumstances, without considering the fuller picture? His years on the bench had taught him to be efficient, but had that efficiency come at the cost of understanding? He reached for his phone, then stopped. What could he say? "I'm sorry I prejudged you" seemed inadequate. As he sat back in his chair, Reynolds realized that true justice required more than simply applying the law. It demanded the wisdom to see the humanity in every case that came before him. Sarah sat at her desk in the quiet hours after evening practice, the gentle hum of the gym's cooling system providing a familiar backdrop to her thoughts. Her laptop screen displayed a blank email template, the cursor pulsing with possibility. Outside her office window, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold reminiscent of her medal. "Building bridges through sports," she typed, then paused. The title felt right, but the words that would follow needed to be perfect. This wasn't about her traffic fine anymore. It was about creating something meaningful from what could have been just another negative encounter. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus's mother. "He hasn't stopped practicing since mastering that routine. Thank you for believing in him." Sarah smiled, drawing inspiration from the text. This was why she had chosen to stay and build something here, rather than chase more lucrative opportunities elsewhere. She began typing again. "You are cordially invited to join us for an evening of connection and understanding at the city sports complex." The words flowed more easily now. She outlined her vision for an event that would bring together athletes, legal professionals, educators, and community leaders for an evening of shared experiences and open dialogue. The guest list grew as she worked. Coaches from neighboring districts, the principal who had given her gym space for kids who couldn't afford regular programs, local business owners who had sponsored equipment, police officers who sometimes stopped by to cheer on the young athletes. And yes, Judge William Reynolds. Sarah hesitated over his name. The memory of his dismissive tone in court still stung, but her Olympic training had taught her that the hardest landings often led to the most important lessons. She added his email to the list, remembering how her own coach had taught her that true champions rise above personal setbacks to see the bigger picture. The event plan took shape as she typed. Interactive demonstrations where guests would attempt simple gymnastics moves, experiencing the trust required between coach and athlete. A showcase of her students' progress, highlighting how sports could build confidence and discipline. Discussion sessions about breaking down barriers and building understanding across different sectors of their community. "Sometimes the greatest distance we need to bridge," she wrote, "is the space between our assumptions and reality. Join us in creating connections that will strengthen our community's future." Sarah included photos of her students' achievements. Marcus landing his first back handspring, Jenny teaching younger kids despite her leg braces, the weekend cleanup crew that had transformed an abandoned warehouse into a practice space. Each image told a story of persistence, support, and growth. Her finger hovered over the send button as she reread the invitation one final time. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong or seeking validation. It was about creating opportunities for the kind of understanding that could prevent others from facing similar judgments. The gym's motion sensor lights dimmed, responding to the stillness of the empty building. Sarah thought about all the early mornings and late nights she'd spent in this space, helping young athletes build not just physical strength but character. She thought about the judge's stern expression and wondered if he'd ever seen the determination in a child's eyes when they finally mastered a difficult move. With a deep breath and the same focus she'd once used to launch herself into complex routines, Sarah clicked send. The email list included over 50 names, educators, officials, business leaders, and yes, one particularly stern judge. As the confirmation appeared on her screen, she smiled, knowing that win or lose, Champions take the initiative to create positive change. The empty gym seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting to see who would accept the invitation to be part of something bigger than themselves. Judge Reynolds sat in his chambers, the invitation email glowing on his computer screen. Through his window, he could see the park across from the courthouse where a group of young athletes stretched on the grass. Their laughter floated up, a sharp contrast to the solemn atmosphere of his office. Building bridges through sports, he read again, his finger tracing the words on the screen. The invitation was elegantly written, without a hint of resentment or accusation. That somehow made it harder to dismiss. Sarah Johnson had taken what could have been a moment of division and transformed it into an opportunity for connection. His clerk knocked and entered with the afternoon's case files. "Your Honor, the Thompson hearing starts in 20 minutes. Reynolds nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the screen. Among the photos attached to the invitation, he spotted one that made him pause. A young girl with leg braces executing a perfect arabesque. Sarah's steady hands hovering nearby, ready to support but not interfere. "Patricia," he called as his clerk turned to leave. "Do you know anything about the community sports program near Madison Elementary?" Patricia's face brightened. "My nephew trains there, the Olympic medalist who runs it. She's amazing. Last month, when his mother, my sister, lost her job, Ms. Johnson refused to accept payment until they got back on their feet, said champions support each other through tough times." Reynolds felt the weight of his earlier judgment pressing heavily on his shoulders. He dismissed Patricia with a nod and turned back to the invitation. The Thompson hearing could wait a few more minutes. His cursor hovered over the accept button. What would his colleagues think? Judges were supposed to maintain professional distance. Yet Emma's words from the presentation echoed in his mind. She says being part of a community means showing up for each other. He clicked through the other photos attached to the invitation. Each one told a story of transformation. An abandoned warehouse turned into a thriving training center, children from all backgrounds working together, parents and coaches forming a support network. This wasn't just about sports. It was about building the kind of community he'd always claimed to serve from the bench. The phone on his desk rang. Emma calling for their weekly chat. "Grandpa, did you get the invitation? Ms. Johnson asked me after practice if you'd seen it. She said she really hopes you'll come. We're going to show everyone the new routine I learned." Reynolds straightened in his chair. "Emma, you train at Ms. Johnson's gym. For 3 months now. Remember when I was scared to try gymnastics because of my asthma? Ms. Johnson helped me create a special routine that works with my breathing. She says limitations are just invitations to be creative." Looking back at his computer screen, Reynolds saw the event in a new light. This wasn't just about making amends or easing his conscience. It was about being part of the change he claimed to want for his community. How many times had he spoken from the bench about the importance of understanding and connection? With a deep breath, he moved his cursor to the accept button. The click seemed to echo in his quiet chamber, carrying the weight of doors opening and bridges being built. He had spent decades issuing judgments. Perhaps it was time to step down from the bench and learn from those he judged. The afternoon sun caught his gavel, casting a long shadow across his desk. Outside, the young athletes were packing up their practice, their energy and potential a reminder of why Sarah's work mattered so much. He had made his choice. Now it was time to see where it would lead. The city sports complex buzzed with an energy that reminded Sarah of competition days. But this time, the excitement stemmed from something more meaningful than medals. Business suits mingled with workout gear as community leaders attempted basic gymnastics moves, their laughter breaking down invisible barriers that had long divided their city. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her Olympic medal catching the light as she demonstrated proper stretching techniques to a group that included 2 police officers and a city council member. "The key is trust," she explained, helping the suited executive attempt a basic balance beam walk. "In gymnastics, like in life, we have to trust each other to move forward." From the corner of her eye, she spotted Judge Reynolds entering the gymnasium. He looked almost vulnerable without his judicial robes, dressed in casual slacks and a polo shirt. Emma bounded ahead of him, already in her leotard, eager to show off her progress to the gathering crowd. "Your Honor," Sarah called out, her voice warm and welcoming. "Would you like to join us? We're learning about balance." The invitation hung in the air for a moment, weighted with meaning that went beyond the simple exercise. Reynolds hesitated, then stepped forward. "I suspect I have much to learn about balance," he admitted, removing his shoes as Sarah had instructed the others to do. The wooden beam, though only inches off the ground, seemed to represent a bigger challenge than any legal argument he'd faced. Sarah offered her hand for support. "The first step is the hardest," she said, helping him onto the beam. "But that's why we're here, to support each other." The surrounding crowd watched as the distinguished judge wobbled slightly, then found his footing with Sarah's guidance. Across the gym, Marcus demonstrated a perfect back handspring, drawing applause from a group of business leaders who had previously questioned the value of investing in community sports programs. Jenny, her leg braces gleaming under the fluorescent lights, led a flexibility workshop for seniors from the local retirement community. "See, Your Honor," Sarah commented as Reynolds successfully completed his first walk across the beam. "Sometimes we find strength in the moments that challenge us most." Her words carried a gentle reminder of their courthouse encounter, but offered a bridge rather than a reproach. Reynolds stepped down, a new understanding in his eyes. "Ms. Johnson," he began, then corrected himself. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions that day in court without seeing the whole picture." Sarah smiled, her coach's instincts recognizing the teachable moment. "In gymnastics, we learn that every landing, even the rough ones, teaches us something valuable. Would you like to share your thoughts with everyone? I think your perspective could be powerful." The judge nodded, and Sarah gathered the crowd. Community leaders, athletes, parents, and officials formed a circle on the gym floor, a physical representation of the barriers being broken down. As Reynolds spoke about assumptions and understanding, Sarah watched Emma beam with pride at her grandfather. "When I accepted this invitation," Reynolds addressed the group, his judicial formality softening, "I thought I was coming to observe. Instead, I'm learning that true justice requires us to step out of our comfort zones and see each other as people first." Sarah added, "That's what sports taught me, that labels and assumptions limit us all. Every person here has something to teach and something to learn." She gestured to the diverse group around them. "This is what community looks like when we choose to build bridges instead of walls." The evening continued with more demonstrations, each one designed to push people beyond their usual roles and perspectives. A business executive spotted a young athlete's cartwheel. A police officer learned a dance routine from a teenager. And through it all, Sarah watched as her vision of connection through sport became reality, one small interaction at a time. 3 months after the Building Bridges Through Sports event, Sarah stood in her expanded gym space, watching sunlight stream through the newly installed windows. The renovation had been made possible by a coalition of local businesses, inspired by what they'd witnessed at the community gathering. Her phone buzzed with a text from Judge Reynolds. "Ready for today's mentorship session?" She smiled, remembering how their unlikely partnership had evolved. The judge now spent Wednesday afternoons at the gym, sharing legal knowledge with teenagers interested in justice system careers while learning about their dreams and challenges. The morning's headlines on her tablet caught her eye. "Local sports program becomes national model for community unity." The article detailed how their city's approach to bridging social divisions through athletics had attracted attention from communities across the country. Sarah's traffic fine, long since dismissed, had sparked something far more valuable than she could have imagined. "Coach Sarah," Marcus called from the main floor, "the elementary school students are here." She watched as 30 young faces filed into the gym, accompanied by their principal, and, to her delight, Judge Reynolds' granddaughter Emma, now a peer mentor for new gymnasts. "Welcome, everyone," Sarah began, her voice carrying the same warmth that had once welcomed a skeptical judge to try the balance beam. Today, we're going to learn about more than just gymnastics. We're going to learn about supporting each other, believing in ourselves, and reaching higher than we thought possible. As if on cue, Judge Reynolds arrived, trading his usual court attire for the volunteer coach's polo shirt that had become his Wednesday uniform. The children greeted him with enthusiastic waves. To them, he wasn't an intimidating judicial figure, but simply Coach Bill, the man who taught them about making good choices while spotting their cartwheels. The district attorney's office called. He mentioned quietly to Sarah as the children began their warm-ups. They want to implement your youth mentorship program in the juvenile justice system. They believe early intervention through sports could make a real difference. Sarah nodded, watching Emma guide a nervous newcomer through a basic tumbling sequence. Champions aren't just made on the competition floor, she replied, echoing the words that had become their program's motto. They're made in moments like these. The gym had become more than a training facility. Local police officers dropped by to join weekend basketball games, building relationships with teenagers who once viewed them with suspicion. Business leaders volunteered as mentors, opening doors to internships and job opportunities. The courthouse staff organized monthly community dinners in the space, breaking bread with families they once only saw in legal proceedings. Sarah's Olympic medal still hung in her office, but it had been joined by other treasures. Photos of successful student athletes, thank you letters from parents, and a framed picture from the bridge building event showing Judge Reynolds' first successful balance beam walk. Each item told a story of transformation, not just of individuals, but of an entire community's perspective. As she watched the morning's activities unfold, students learning, volunteers encouraging, barriers dissolving, Sarah recognized that this was her true gold medal moment. The victory wasn't in proving anyone wrong or right, but in creating a space where understanding could grow and differences could become strengths. Ready for the new advanced class? Emma asked, now confident and poised as she prepared to assist with the day's lessons. Always ready, Sarah replied, stepping onto the training floor. Around her, the gym buzzed with the energy of possibility. Proof that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a simple willingness to see beyond first impressions and take that first step onto an unfamiliar path.